Good evening and welcome once again to another program of Issues in the News, where we discuss the important events that would have taken place in our country over the past week or so. And as I normally say, we always have a number of important issues to discuss on this program. This week is no different. As you know, as I normally do, I want to welcome all of you to another edition of this program. And I want to begin by welcoming our viewers who are joining us on West Coast, Berbice, Mahaika to Rosignol on the television and beyond Rosignol on the television. That's in Region 5. I want to welcome our viewers who are joining us on television in Region 6, East Berbice to Quarantine, to Crabwood Creek, that entire Quarantine coast. I want to welcome you to another program of Issues in the News. I want to also take this opportunity to welcome our viewers and listeners who are joining us on Freedom Radio from Rob Street, Georgetown, Guyana. And I want to welcome all of you who are joining me live on Facebook across Guyana, the Caribbean, North America, Europe, and wherever you are located and are joining us on the Facebook platform. Please take this opportunity to share this program with your friends, share this program with your fans. Invite as many persons as possible to join in tonight's discussion so that we can engage as far and as wide as possible. Once again, I invite you to send an invitation to all your friends, send a notification to all your friends, press that share button on your Facebook page or your Facebook account so that all your friends and fans alike can join us in tonight's discussion. I want to begin by saying that the delegation from Ghana is concluding a very successful visit to our country. The distinguished Vice President of Ghana is leading an important delegation of government functionaries as well as members from the private sector of that country, and they have been interacting with His Excellency the President and the government of Guyana, as well as with our private sector and others in the business community as we try to strengthen relations between the two countries, as we try to develop greater trade links, as we try to create business opportunities, as we try to marry and twin the different opportunities that are available, all in an effort to advance the welfare of the peoples of both of our countries. There are many, many similarities between the country of Ghana and Guyana. We have very similar climatic conditions. We have a very similar legal system. We have a very similar resource-based economy. They have found oil recently as well. So there are many, many opportunities, many similarities, and this visit by the Vice President of Ghana is in reciprocity to a visit conducted or done by our Vice President earlier this year after the President would have met the President of Ghana at the United Nations early this year. So a number of memoranda of understanding have been signed by different ministries and different agencies of the government of Guyana, and also a lot of strategic information for the advancement of trade, business, and bilateral cooperation have been exchanged by the two governments as well as the two private sectors of the respective countries. So we expect that a lot of opportunities, a lot of investments opportunities, a lot of trade opportunities, a lot of job creating opportunities would stem and spring from this platform of strong relations which are being cemented during this visit. The visit is being concluded, I believe, tonight, and the delegation will leave our shores shortly. We had some very, very good time, business-wise, governance-wise, as well as socially over the past 72 hours. So I think that that is a good engagement that has been just concluded or is being concluded as I speak. A very important article appears in today's Stabrook News, headline Schuman hammers government for not consulting indigenous peoples, and cites the South Rupununi mining deal as the platform for his statement. I am told that Mr. Schuman is now coming to the end of his parliamentary stint, and I suppose that he wants to go out with a bang. But one does not have to attack the government and to fabricate stories if one wants to go out with some kind of one wants to make an impact. And I'm surprised that Mr. Schuman has made the statements that he has made. Speaking personally, I think that I've had good relations. I've had good relations with Mr. Schuman in the Parliament. We have always had very courteous conversations. We engaged when it was necessary, but I can't imagine that Schuman would take such a position. Schuman accepted a job with the government of Guyana. He's employed with the Civil Aviation Authority, and the Prime Minister has issued a statement today in which the Prime Minister outlined that only October, just a month and a half ago, he met with Schuman for a long meeting, and they discussed a number of important issues affecting our indigenous people. And as a result of that meeting, Mr. Schuman published on his Facebook page a very long statement lauding the meeting with the Prime Minister and recognizing the government's discussions with him on a number of crucial issues, and recognizing also the government's engagements with him on important matters pertaining to the development of our indigenous communities. And the Prime Minister rightfully expressed shock at this complete 300 and 180 degrees turn, exemplified by Mr. Schuman in today's article and letter which appears in the Stabrook News. So what Schuman says, one has to take with a pinch of salt, because one is at loss to understand why Mr. Schuman would launch such an attack on a government with whom he's employed and with whom he shared good relations. He supported many, if not all, of our initiatives in the National Assembly. And I don't know how, all of a sudden, we have become a government that is non-consultative. I don't understand when this development took place, when this government transformed itself in a radically different organization than that which he engaged when he met with the Prime Minister. Let me read what he published on his page when he met with the Honorable Prime Minister. No, I don't have it here with me, but I read it earlier today where, oh yes, I have it. This is what Schuman published on his page. The Prime Minister iterated his government's commitment to taking steps to ensure indigenous peoples are part of the development of Guyana under the One Guyana framework, and that the infrastructural needs are critical to such future plans, along with ICT access, among others. He was also very receptive to ideas put forth on advancing initiatives that will enhance indigenous peoples' presence and participation in Guyana, unquote. This is Schuman writing after meeting the Prime Minister and posting this on his Facebook page on the 25th of October 2021. The Prime Minister writes in a statement, on the 25th of October 2021, at my office, Mr. Schuman and I cordially discussed several matters related to indigenous peoples' development and the government's approach to bridging the digital divide and eliminating the disparity in quality of life between our hinterland and coastland. And it is in that engagement, or as a result of that engagement, Schuman writes, I quote, the Prime Minister iterated his government's commitment to taking steps to ensure indigenous people are part of the development of Guyana under the One Guyana framework, and that the infrastructural needs are critical to such future plans, along with ICT access and others. He was also very receptive to ideas put forth on advancing initiatives that will enhance indigenous peoples' presence and participation in Guyana, unquote. This is from Mr. Lennox Schuman, published on his Facebook page on the 25th of August 2021. So it's either Mr. Schuman is duplicitous or Mr. Schuman has lost his memory or is affected by some other things that affect his mind. I am not sure, because that is what he said on the 25th of October, and now on the 6th of December, he speaks of the government as being non-consultative, and he writes a blistering attack on the government in his letter to the editor of the Stabrook News, which the Stabrook News has converted into a news item and made it its lead story. Significantly, Mr. Schuman speaks about an engagement with me in relation to the Law Reform Commission Amendment Bill. Viewers would recall that under APNU AFC, a Law Reform Commission Act was passed, and we criticized that act when we were in the opposition on the ground that that the constitution of the commission was not broad-based and the appointing mechanism was singularly placed in the hands of the president. And we felt that that was not good for a law reform commission. So we took amendments to the National Assembly to expand the composition of the commission, because under the APNU AFC, all the persons to that commission would have been appointed by the president with no consultation with any organization, and they were all lawyers or persons with legal qualifications. We felt that that is a very myopic position to adopt in relation to a law reform commission. And we changed that. We put in the law that such a commission must be appointed after consulting with organizations representing religion, organizations representing the legal profession, organizations representing the trade union movement, organizations representing the private sector, and organizations representing the Rights Commission. That was what we tabled in our amendments to the National Assembly. And we also gave the president a power of appointing two nominees in the exercise of his deliberate judgment. So we had a very broad-based commission, or persons coming from various agencies through recommendations, representing a wide cross-section of interests in the society. In the National Assembly, Mr. Schuman approached me when the bill was first laid and said that there is no representation coming from the Amerindian community. Now, the Amerindian, though an important group in our country, is at the end of the day an ethnic grouping, and there is no other ethnic grouping represented in the composition, or rather the appointing mechanism of the Law Reform Commission. Labor is represented, religion is represented, the legal profession is represented, the private sector commission is represented, but there is no ethnic organization or ethnic community that is represented. Mr. Schuman asked that I amend, or that the government amends the proposals that we took to the Parliament to include the National Tushao Council as a body to be consulted. The government accepted that recommendation from Mr. Schuman. On the floor, when the government was debating this bill, I recognized Mr. Schuman's contribution to the bill. I said on the floor, it is reported in the press and it is part of the Hansard, I said on the floor, as I was speaking, piloting the amendments to the National Assembly, that Mr. Schuman's recommendation is being incorporated into the bill. So how it is that this government is not consultative, and how it is that the government is not committed to Amerindian development and to our indigenous people, when the government, upon Mr. Schuman's recommendation, amended the law to allow indigenous participation in the commission as the only ethnic group in this country. We must understand that Guyana is a land of 6 races. We have East Indians, we have Africans, we have Chinese, we have Portuguese, we have Europeans, we have a mixture, Douglas, and we also have Amerindians. None of the others are represented in the composition mechanism or the appointing mechanism, of this law, except the indigenous community. And that was inserted by Mr. Schuman making representations to me. Yet, Mr. Schuman attacks and criticizes me because in the appointment now, an Amerindian nominee from the indigenous, from the National Tushao Council, which he asked to be inserted, that a nominee from that council did not make it to the eventual commission. Now, the commission only has a limited number of members, and you have a whole umbrella of organizations that you have to consult. Immediately, it ought to be clear that you can't get a nominee from each of the organizations that one has to consult, because the organizations are larger in number than the nominees to be appointed on the commission by the minister who has to do the consultation, and I am the subject minister. So you couldn't receive, or rather you couldn't put a nominee from each of the various organizations because you don't have enough seats. So a nominee did not come from the National Tushao Council. Neither did a nominee was not appointed from the National Tushao Council. Neither was a nominee appointed from the religious community. But I didn't hear an uproar from the religious community because I suppose they understood. A nominee did not come, a nominee was not appointed from the trade union movement because all of the nominees were looked at and the persons most suitably qualified were selected by the minister, as the minister is entitled to do under the law. And the minister ensured that there is a sufficiently wide cross-section of interests represented on that commission. But Mr. Schuman, simply because the NTC nominees, the National Tushao Council nominees, one of them was not appointed, he takes great umbrage to that and attacks the government in the manner that he has done. It is not fair. The attack is unfounded, and the criticisms are without basis. Mr. Schuman said that I told him that he should take the matter up with the president. I never told Schuman any such thing. What I would have told Mr. Schuman is that I am the minister and I have to consult with these organizations and select the best representation, in my opinion, from the various organizations that I have to consult. That the president has two nominees that he can appoint from the exercise of his deliberate judgment. So it is free and open for the president to choose someone from the Amerindian community. The law provides that latitude to the president. I never asked Schuman to go and take anything up with His Excellency the President. So there is also misinformation, prevarication, concoction, and fabrication in what constitutes his disclosures in this long and exhausting missive that he has penned in the newspapers. The Prime Minister has adequately dealt with him, I think, and I hope that I have contributed in some way to bringing clarity to the issue at hand as expressed by Mr. Schuman. The other important issue that has taken place in our country over the past week or so, which I want to pay some attention to, is the arrest of Mr. Jordan, Winston Jordan, the former Minister of Finance. In another program in which I was interviewed by Eddie Lane, I spent a great amount of time explaining in great details the facts and circumstances surrounding the transaction for which Mr. Jordan was arrested. I do not intend to recite those facts and circumstances. I did say, and I will repeat now, that the facts that I have in this matter come from the civil case which has been filed by the government against Mr. Jordan and against BK Marines and others in relation to the very transaction. I have nothing to do with the police matter. I have nothing to do with the investigations by the police, except the government had written a letter to the police requesting an investigation to be done. But in terms of anything else, the government plays no role. My explanation and my acquaintance with the facts are because of my connection with the civil matters. Civil matter, the same set of facts, the same documents I have reviewed, and I have attempted to explain in some details those facts and circumstances in that program. But it is interesting to observe the statements that have been made by the Alliance for Change and Mr. Joseph Harmon and the PNC in response to this incident. First of all, let me make it abundantly clear. As Mr. Harmon himself said while he was in government, and it is now gaining some traction on social media, that no one is above the law, that all are subject to the law, that once there is wrongdoing that borders on criminality or constitutes criminal conduct, a police force, our police force, has a mandate to investigate. They have a power of arrest and detention in appropriate circumstances. Mr. Jordan was not incarcerated as he was about to be. I am told, and the newspaper reports, the press reported that he collapsed, claiming that he is ill. The police did the correcting based upon what is reported in the press. They allowed him to seek medical attention. At all times, Mr. Jordan was accompanied by two attorneys at law who were allowed to be present with him as he was being questioned by the police. That is what the law provides for. I haven't heard a single contention by any of the lawyers that Mr. Jordan's rights during that engagement were infringed or abused or violated. None of the lawyers have made that allegation. They may contend that the investigation is without merit, that the charge is a witch hunting charge, or the exercise is politically inspired. That's normal. Mr. Jordan is a politician, and this investigation, as I said, is being done, so that is a natural allegation to make. But while he was interacting with the police, they did not allege that the police acted excessively. So what then is the hue and cry? Speaking for myself, I have already stated that this is one of the most vulgar transactions I have ever seen. And I will leave it at that. The facts are already out there. I don't plan to recite them, but to treat with certain facts that occurred when the very people who are now condemning what is transpiring, what they did to Ashley Singh, to myself, to Roger Lunchan, to Bharat Jagdev, to Priya Manikchan, to Samuel Hines, to Irfan Ali, to Clement Rohi, and the list goes on. Nigel Dharamlal, Siraj, and a whole host of other people. All opposition politicians, most of them members of parliament, one of them leader of the opposition, but all affiliated with the PPP in some form or fashion. And this is not tit for tat, and this is not payback. Nothing like that. I say so because the transaction that the police are currently investigating bears no resemblance to anything concerning what the PPP leaders were being arrested for. And I will deal with the transactions one by one. There is no basis to compare. Firstly, let us take the Ashley Singh transaction. A lot of people are drawing a comparison. The Ashley Singh transaction, first of all, let me tell you what they are. One of them relates to the sale of a property to National Hardware, Guyana Limited. It's for $600,000. The transaction took place, first of all, in 2009, 10 years after which Ashley Singh was charged. Ashley Singh was charged in 2018. This is a 10-year-ago transaction in 2009. The land in question was publicly advertised. That is the second distinguishing factor. National Hardware was the only company that expressed an interest in the land. The third distinguishing feature. Fourthly, cabinet decision authorized the sale. Cabinet decision authorized the sale. Fifthly, go and see the land now, and you will see the transformation that has taken place. What was sold was swampland, cow pasture, overgrown with bushes, canals, trenches, flooding was taking place on the land, and it was occupied by squatters. That is why no other person expressed an interest. The place is now called the Demerara Estates. It is located behind the Giffland Mall, and go there and you will see a modern housing scheme built there with many professional Guyanese and many Guyanese of all races, all class, building houses and are residing there. That is what the investor did with the land. This was an investment, a government partnering with an investor to develop a portion of land for the purpose, to the benefit of Guyanese people for housing purposes. So you're talking about a 10-year transactions. The other one was Movie Town. Let us take Movie Town. That was a 2011 transaction. It was 8 years old at the time when they charged Ashley Singh. 8 years old. And that property is Movie Town. It was sold at that time for, I believe, $1 million US. Now that may not sound like a lot of money now, but look at the work that the investor had to do on the land. But before we get that, this property was also publicly advertised. The person who came in with the highest bid couldn't complete the transaction, and that process was abandoned. The Movie Town people came and offered that same price that the highest bidder came in with, and the property was sold to them. Go to Movie Town now and look at the transformation that has taken place with that property. It can be accurately described as perhaps the most spectacular piece of real estate in Guyana. It is a tourist attraction. It is a piece of real estate that you, when you look at it, you feel proud to be living in Guyana and to be a Guyanese. That transaction also was supported by a cabinet decision. Look at how that piece of land was transformed and has transformed the entertainment industry in our country and the image of our country. You see the difference? That also went through a public process, as I said. That was also supported by cabinet's decision. Ashley Singh and Brassington were charged. They were both out of the country at the time. I represented Ashley Singh. I wrote to Soku to say that my client is out of the country and they can get him through me. Notwithstanding, they served a summons at his house. He was overseas. He came into the country from the United States of America, came into the country to comply with the warrant. In adherence to the warrant, to the charge, to the summons. He complied with the summons. Yet, when he turned up in the court, in the presence of his lawyers, he was whisked away, handcuffed, hand and bangled to his legs. He was bangled both hands and feet. Although he came from another continent, another country to attend court. In observance, adherence, and obedience with a summons that was served at his house. Why? They wanted to humiliate him and Brassington. Nobody has shackled Jordan. Nobody put him through any shoot as they did to Ashley Singh, like a common criminal in Brassington. Dr. Roger Luncheon was on a wheelchair when they came for him. I spent days with different persons as a lawyer at Soku. Former Prime Minister Sam Hines was not even told why he was taken down. I think I spent about 2 days there with him, giving statements after statements. And as I said, none of the transactions bear any resemblance to what is under review here. All these monies, whatever they were fully paid before title was passed. All of them. And they were through a public competitive process. That is how the prices were arrived at. Having said that, let us go. Let me say firstly, let me go to the AFC statement. They describe the arrest as unlawful and vulgar, and they describe the PPP as a naked dictatorship. Then they say this: the nation needs to be reminded that Winston Jordan was at all times a gazetted minister with responsibility for finance within the David Granger constitutionally appointed cabinet of ministers. As per the Constitution and established by Commonwealth practice, ministers operate under a doctrine of collective responsibility and are answerable to the National Assembly of the Parliament. Firstly, all of this applies to Ashley Singh. All of this applied to Ashley Singh. But the AFC didn't know that at the time. They didn't know that at the time. But most importantly, I have looked at the documents in the civil file. I can't see a cabinet decision that authorized Mr. Jordan to act in the way that he did. Significantly, that transaction was concluded after a no confidence motion was passed, when the courts declared that the government was in caretaker mode. Caretaker mode means caretaker mode. You cannot sell. If I put you as a caretaker in my house, you cannot sell the house or anything in the house. They go on to say that it is nothing personal. He was taking actions pursuant to a decision of the cabinet. I keep saying that the file doesn't reveal a decision of cabinet. Then they go on to speak at length about the transaction, and they're misleading, talking about a lease transaction with an option to purchase. Yes, that is so. But the option to purchase, according to the agreement, and the agreement is public, is only to be exercised when a whole set of developmental works are completed. None of that happened. None of that happened. Mr. Harman makes similar statements. And the PNC, they call it charge from top charges, all sorts of things. And here it is. The facts say that a $8 billion property was sold by a government minister without directions from a cabinet for $20 million. $20 million. Because that is all that was paid. The price was 110 million, but only 20 million was paid and title pass after a government is in caretaker mode. So these are serious issues that distinguish this case from any other case. And what we must not make the comparison where a comparison does not exist to be made. Those comparisons should not be made where it is not possible. Because as I keep saying, there is no basis. And Mr. Jordan was not shackled. Dr. Luncheon was wheeled in a wheelchair to Soku. That was broadcast on national television. What did he do? What did he do? Like Gary Best, he bought a piece of land at that place called Pradoville, that they're calling Pradoville. Gary Best was never arrested, but Luncheon was. What did Rohi do? That is what he did also. He bought a plot of land there, sold by the government of Guyana, above the board. So, this country is governed by laws, and I'm not even talking about my own story. I was persecuted for a couple law books. I'm not even bringing that into the equation. And I spent 4 or 3 years in the court system. I spent 3 years. I went to court for 3 years. So, my friends, the law, as Mr. Harman correctly says, must be allowed to take its course. The investigative arm of the state must be allowed to do its job, irrespective of whom is involved. Or else we will have a state in which the law will not apply to politicians or those who may have held political office. Is that what we want in our society? I don't think so. I don't think so. So I think I've said enough on those matters. I want to speak briefly about an exciting parliamentary agenda that we have before the end of the year. As we have indicated, we are going to have a parliamentary sitting, I think it's now made public, on Monday, next Monday. It will start at 10 in the morning so that we have the entirety of the day and a number of important matters will be concluded on that day, and also a number of important bills will be laid on that day. We have a number of bills that are outstanding on the agenda, which we will hope to conclude. Very important bills in relation to law and order, home affairs bills, and we also have the local content bill, the Sovereign Wealth Fund bill, and a number of other bills that will be tabled before the end of the year. So we have the amendments to the Power of Attorney bill that is there. I spoke about that last week. We have the Deeds Registry Authority Amendment Bill that I spoke about that last week as well. And we have the Local Content Bill will be tabled. The Sovereign Wealth Fund Amendment Bill will be tabled. And maybe the Condominium Bill will be tabled. And the body transplant bill may also be tabled. Maybe all not Monday, but certainly before the end of the year as we have promised. So I will go now to see if I can engage quickly with some of you who are following us on Facebook. I'm going now to look at your comments, and let me see if I can answer a few of the comments. It's taking some time before I get to you. I hope I can do so quickly. Let me see. There are a lot of comments here. A lot of people still. Let me see. Some implemented the DFC report. I don't know what is the DFC report. I'm not sure what the caller is talking about. Let me see. I'm trying to get. Can you talk about those police stops? Well, I want to spend an entire program dealing with police stopping users of the road. And I want to have the law at my disposal. I want to refer to case law. I want to refer to the various sections of the Road Traffic Act, the Constitution, and the relevant provisions of other important statutes when I address that. But it is something that I would like to do, and I intend to do it because we need guidance. We need to guide our police. We need to ensure that the rights of citizens are not violated, but at the same time, the police are allowed to discharge the statutory functions. Persons are calling upon me to say something about Burke. What can I say about Burke? The police has issued a wanted bulletin over some statements that he has made. I pay no attention to people like Burke. The police apparently will be dealing with him, and you will hear about it and you will read about it in due course. I have no contribution to make to Mr. Burke and what he says. Burke does not exist in my vocabulary and in my life, so I don't think Burke is sensible. So I leave Burke alone. That's why I don't say anything. I'm trying to get. A lot of people are asking about the Burke issue, but I spoke at length about Mr. Schumann's statement. Someone is still asking me. The PAC, well, the PAC is still in some type of confusion. I've not followed what has happened recently, and I prefer not to comment until I understand what is transpiring there. There is a person asking me a question whether the law provides that a bystander must be 100 feet away when the police making an arrest. No, there is no such law. Well, at least I don't know of any such law. Um, they're asking whether the police are trained in law before they are hired. There is a police training that takes place before police men and women are inducted into the force, but certainly more training is required, not only in terms of law, but in many other areas that are relevant to the police discharging their functions. So, no doubt, a lot of training is taking place, but we have to overhaul the type of training and the system of training to which the police are getting, to which the police are accustomed, and implement a modern style of training for the police force, one that is in keeping with today's realities. We are implementing, and I will speak about this in a subsequent program, a new prosecutorial program for both the police as well as the holders of the LLB degree at the University of Guyana. That program will come on stream very shortly. The manuals have been prepared, the syllabus has been prepared, and we now have to get the University of Guyana has been engaged, and I believe that those who are piloting this exercise have made tremendous progress. And when I get all the information that I need, I will make a full disclosure on this program because I'm very exciting. It is the first time that we will have very highly trained persons in all of our magistrate courts prosecuting instead of police officers or in addition to police officers. The police officers who are prosecutors will be there, but we will have a semi-lawyer at least who will be part of the prosecutorial arm of the state in all the magistrates' court in our country. It's going to be a gradual exercise, but in 2 years max, I believe, we should be able to have a person duly qualified to be prosecuting, and that will have a positive impact on the success rate of the state in prosecuting. I have no doubt that it will improve and the state's success rate and will inspire greater public confidence in the criminal justice system. And victims of crime will feel a little better when they leave the precincts of the court because they will feel and they will see discernibly that their interest is being represented by a person who is qualified to represent them and trained properly to do so. My operator is signaling to me that we are approaching program time, so I want to thank you very much for spending the past hour with me. I think we have covered a great number of issues. I hope that I have brought some clarity to the issues that I have addressed. I hope that you have benefited from the discourse tonight. I will begin to work on getting a telephone line in this studio so that we can have a call-in session as well, so that we can speak and the program can become even more interactive. I know that that you want to interact. I'm looking at all the messages that are coming through, and I'm excited rather to interact with you by phone, and I will continue to try to interact with you on the Facebook page as I see the messages unfolding. But it is an evolving exercise, and we are going to get better at it. So I want to thank you once again for being with me over the past hour or so, and to wish you all the best for the rest of the week. COVID is with us, and you know you're hearing about all these new strains and variants that are unfolding and emanating from all corners of the earth. We have to remain vigilant, we have to stay safe, we have to keep wearing our masks, we have to take the boosters, we have to take the vaccines, we have to sanitize, and we have to take all the precautions that are part of our COVID protocols to ensure that we remain safe. So I ask you to do so, and I will see you again next week as we resume discussing important issues in the news. Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.